Okay, I'll admit it. I use this material on personalities a lot. I use it when I teach on leadership. I use it when I teach on spiritual gifts. I use it in my class on healthy church relationships. And I do this because I consider it important, obviously. Um, it's a part of what I do in my church as well. And I think that this idea of understanding how God created us is essential in our doing the work of the church. Understanding who He created us to be and how His grace has been at work in us from the very beginning. And His design of us and our personality, our spiritual gifts, our life experiences, and our passions and the abilities that He's worked into our lives. Specifically, when we talk about the personalities, it is so important for us to understand our own strengths and our own weaknesses and understand a little bit, as much as we can, about the strengths and weaknesses of others. Now, when I first started teaching this at my church, and I was introducing our staff to some of the material that I was going to be using as I taught the material to the church. Our pastor asked me if his personality gave him an excuse to sin, that he sinned because of the personality that God gave him. And he was saying that in response to my saying that we had these weaknesses because of our personality. And I quickly told him that our personality is not an excuse to sin. And we need to be very careful as we read through these personalities that we don't say, that's just the way I am. I can't help it. I can't be any different. And as you look at your personality, I hope that you will take the approach to this that Tim LaHaye did in his books on the spirit-controlled temperament. Tim LaHaye shared that it is the spirit's control in our life that helps us work out the weaknesses that we might have. I kind of think of it as keeping step with the Spirit as is described in Galatians 5. Um, and you know as well as I know that Galatians 5 takes us through the fruit of the Spirit. But if you look at starting in verse 16, um, Paul writes to the Galatians, um, so I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They're in conflict to each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. Skipping on down to the fruit of the Spirit, he says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such thing there is no law. Those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking and envying each other. If you'll think in terms of two people in a potato race, a potato sack race, where the three-legged race, where you've got your legs tied together, and you're trying to learn to keep in step with each other. And at first, it's very awkward. And as you give over control um, to the other person, you develop an ability to stay in step with each other, and you step much better together. And it's much the same when we think about walking with the Holy Spirit, that we've crucified our flesh, and so we've let go of our fleshly desires and our fleshly passions. And as we give over control, or we try to measure our steps with the steps of the Holy Spirit, then those weaknesses that are a part of our personality um, will come under the Spirit's control, and they will be turned into strengths. And what I would challenge you to do as you look over the lists that describe your personality, you're going to see things on your list that you consider strengths, that are great about your personality and are wonderful about your personality. You're going to see other things in your list of characteristics that are typical of your personality, generally true of your personality, because not everything in your description is true about you, but things that are generally true about others who have your personality. And you're going to see that some of those things are weaknesses. And what I would challenge you to do is to work down the list of the fruit of the Spirit that I just read to you, and think about your one of your negative traits, and think, what what fruit of the Spirit would be the opposite of this trait? If I were keeping in step with the Spirit, how would this be changed? This negative trait, what fruit of the Spirit would help me in dealing with this negative trait? For instance, in um, in my personality, which is the high I personality, the inspiring personality, or the high sanguine, I tend to be disorganized, and I tend to have difficulty following through on things. I have great ideas. I'm a great starter, but that follow through is a little difficult for me. So as I look down the fruit of the Spirit, I see love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, fruit, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I see three aspects of the fruit of the Spirit that I think would make a difference in my disorganization. Forbearance, or patience. If I would stay more patient with a task and with others, I might would finish out a task. Faithfulness. God has been faithful to me, and I want to be faithful in fulfilling and carrying out what He's given me to do. And definitely self-control is a fruit of the Spirit that I need to exercise, that I need to gain um, as um, as a means of having that Spirit-controlled temperament. And it would help me with my disorganization and my inability to finish a task. Um, See if that works for you with some of your negative traits. Hold up your negative traits to the fruit of the Spirit. And if you are walking with the Spirit, you will bear fruit. And you will find that some of these negative characteristics of your personality aren't as prevalent in you. And that fruit of the Spirit is much more evident than those negative characteristics. Don't think of one personality as better than the other. We need it all. And don't think of your personality in isolation. You are a believer. You've crucified the flesh. You also have received a spiritual gift. And none of those things can be considered all alone. They're all a part of God's wonderful grace at work in each of us.